Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It is TJ, your host, and we have skipped along in Lundy Bancroft's book, Why Does He Do That Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men or Other. First off, this book is about abuse in general. It has nothing to do with necessarily a personality disorder. However, this particular chapter ties right in with the Cluster B monsters that we've discussed before. The chapter is called Abusive People and Their Allies. When I hear that, I think of flying monkeys. As often he does, it begins with quotes.
I used to feel so close to his mother, but now she seems to hate me.
I can't even call up our friends anymore because they don't want to get in the middle of it all.
Sometimes I feel like I must be the one who's screwed up because my own family sides with him.
I don't bother to call the police when it gets scary because he's got buddies on the force and they'll just help him out.
The custody evaluator reported to the court that I'm hysterical and that the children should be with him.
Very common with Cluster B monsters because they're fake. They maintain their fictitious persona for the world that believe them, and you are a regular person being thrown off course into a sickening situation that you've never experienced in many cases, and you're like on the edge screaming and hysterical acting because it's devastating to you. And so they can just point at you, see how crazy that person is? While they're just sitting there perfect, fake. Bancroft tells us the examples all came from cases that he's been involved in. And in each one, something is happening that's very difficult to account for. A lady flees into hiding because she's terrified of her abusive partner. He looks everywhere trying to find her and cannot track her down. But after this quest, he decides to visit her parents. He goes to the parents in tears and says,
"Oh, I know I treated your daughter terribly."
Oh, and acts like he's really hurt. Tears come out, and he begs them,
"Oh, could you please give me her address, just so that I can send her a letter apologizing to her for all I've done?"
And the parents give it to him. A man joins an abuser program that has been denied certification by the state's Department of Public Health because it violates the state's regulations. While in this program, the man complains that his lady friend sometimes slaps him and hits him. The counselor, who's a licensed psychologist, responds by encouraging the abusive person to get a restraining order against this abusive lady. The psychologist admits this openly to Bancroft. The daughter of a divorced, abused woman discloses in explicit detail that she's being sexually abused by her daddy during the visitation. The mother goes to court to request professional evaluation of the daughter. The mother's sister arrives in court with the abuser the next day, with whom she's now become friends despite the fact that she hated him before the divorce. The sister not only tells the judge that the sexual abuse allegations are lies, but actually asks the judge to take custody of the girl away from the mother and give it to her. Fortunately, in this case, he says the judge does not allow the sister to take the girl. The evaluation goes forward and winds up confirming the sexual abuse. Pizzagate, people covering up crap that's real. An abusive man's therapist assigns a psychological diagnosis to the abused woman without ever meeting her, relying entirely upon the man's descriptions of the partner, despite knowing that he's being accused of abusing her. A mother flees with her kids to a shelter for abused women because her house is vandalized. She can tell it was her physically abusive ex-husband who did it, and she takes the damage as a clear threat to her security. Within several days of fleeing, she contacts the court-appointed custody evaluator to let it know where she's at. The custody evaluator, however, shoots off a report to the court stating the woman has no reason to be afraid of her husband, although she's told him of her partner's history of violence and threats, and recommends that the children be taken from the mother and given to the father. He does not mention the woman's phone call to him from the shelter in his report. On the basis of the custody evaluation report, all 3 children, including a girl who is only 3 years old, are sent to live at the abusive person's home, and the mother is permitted only brief and supervised visits because she's now being labeled a flight risk. How are abusive people able to attract allies or flying monkeys to their cause? And why do some people become such enthusiastic and at times vicious agents of the abusive person? To answer these questions, we need to look not only at the mindset of abusive people, but also at the socially acceptable attitudes and styles of interaction that an abusive person can use to prevail upon other people to do his or her dirty work. Why does the abusive person seek allies? Controlling and intimidating a partner is not that easy. A guy's got a better chance of dominating a lady than vice versa, but still, it's a challenge, because not very many people in this world will willingly consent to having all their rights systematically denied. The abusive person is thus faced repeatedly with the problem, from his perspective, of his partner's continued resistance to his control. Over time, he gets tired of bullying this lady all by himself. Certain other impediments can trip up this abusive person. For example, changes in the societal attitudes about abuse, including improvements in some important laws and policies, can make it more difficult to get away with such behaviors. The physically frightening or sexually abusive partner, for example, is much more likely to be arrested than he would have been 10 to 15 years ago today. The partner now has the option of seeking a court order to keep him or her away from her. Perhaps the most important thing is that silence surrounding abuse is being broken. Just like with YouTube, silence is broken about these cluster B monsters. Before, we just thought we ended up with the wrong person. Oh dear, I'll try better next time. No, it's not just the wrong person, because the next wrong person displays many, if not the same, characteristics as the other, because we can become magnets for such filth. Perhaps most important is that the silence surrounding abuse is being broken. In a current case of Bancroft's involving a psychological abusive person, close friend flying monkeys of the lady sat her down one day and they staged an intervention in which they supportively pressed her to recognize the impact her husband's abuse was having upon her. Unlike the situation years ago, there are now various ways in which an abused person can find assistance, or assistance can find her or him, as it did in this case. In this context, an abuser has to work harder than ever to keep the partner blaming herself or himself and to fend off helping hands that might reach her. One great way to keep people off her side is to win them over to his side first. Besides, he feels that he deserves the allies, and why is that? True to the cluster B monster? Because he considers himself to be the victim. Or herself. Isn't that sick? You may wonder why an abusive person feels so justified in their actions. They distort their stories so much when seeking support. First, an abusive person doesn't want to have to explain its worst behaviors. Its outright cruelty, for example, or the violence that it commits to people who might find those acts to be distasteful. And it may not feel confident that the justifications and excuses it uses for doing these things will be accepted. Second, it may carry some kind of guilt or shame about its worst acts, as many abusive people do. The desire to escape those feelings is part of why it looks for validation from others, which relieves any nagging self-doubt. He considers his guilt feelings to be a weakness that he just needs to overcome. And last, he may lie because he's convinced himself of his own distortions. The narcissistic abuser, for example, considers his fabrications to be real, genuine, which is one of the reasons why lie detector tests are unreliable in cases of abuse, including child sexual abuse. Because they've convinced themselves they're not lying, so they're going to sit there with their lie detector test and say, "No, I did not abuse that child. No, I didn't do this." And there'll be no change in their system because it's blanked up, to begin with, the fact also that they convince themselves they've done nothing wrong.
I am the Narcopath.
Hi, it's me, the Narcopath. In case you don't remember, we used to date. I'm the one that got away. I'm here to give you a little confession or explanation. I remember we were seeing each other and you found out that I was seeing a few other guys at the time. But I told you that when Valentine's Day came, we were going to make it exclusive. Just you, just me. Nobody else in my Virginia, and nobody else on your private parts. If you recall, the night we were meeting in public, I was nowhere to be found. And I knew you were excited because you couldn't wait to have me like anyone would be proud to have me. Because I'm the most beautiful chick out there. That night, you called me and found out. It just so turned out that I was on another date. That's right, on the night we were supposed to become exclusive. I didn't see what the big deal was. There was always the next day, but for some reason you had a problem with it. And you had the nerve to pour your drink down the shirt of my new date. Well, I couldn't have that. I told him, see, he's crazy. Did you see that? Well, shortly afterwards, he didn't work out. That's why I called you out of the blue, telling you how wrong it was what I did and acting like it really bothered me and I really missed you and all I can do is think of you and you ate it right up. Only to find that it was a booty call, just because I couldn't get any that night from him. Shortly afterwards, I left. Didn't even leave a note. You were passed out. Well, that's what happened, in case you're wondering.
Well, I finally did it. You'll never believe what squeezed out of my Virginia. Take a look at it. It's my own flesh and blood. It's transhuman. It's my baby.
One more thing. I know that when we were dating in the beginning, you were really skeptical because I always seemed to hang around the big guys in the bands. They gave me rides home. I gave them rides in other ways. You were always concerned, always jealous of them, thinking I had something going with them, judging by the way some of them interacted with me. And I always told you, honey, you are paranoid. I'm not attracted to the guys in the bands. Even though the truth is, I've always had a thing for guys in bands, but you did not need to know that. So I told you I wasn't attracted to guys in bands. The truth was, I was with every single one of them. Those nights I didn't come home, and I told you, oh, my phone died. I was with the band, usually more than one of them. So now that you got that out of the way, you can understand a little bit more about me. I hope it helps you. I love the band. Oh.
Hi, honey.
It's me. Remember me? The Narcopath that ruined your life?
Well, I'm back now. Wondering if you want to give me a second chance.
I know I've changed a little, but tough. We all change. What do you say?
I remember that little stuffed animal you used to cuddle with in the bedroom. I was thinking of it the other day. So what do you say?
I know I'm sexy. You want to be with me? You think you could love me?